So what if one day, out of the blue, you woke up as a Pokemon? That would be crazy. Now what if you couldn't change back to a human? And what if you couldn't even remember how or why you became a Pokemon? This is where we find ourselves at the beginning of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red and Blue Rescue Team, a dungeon crawler spin-off series in the ever-popular Pokemon franchise. The developers of these games, known as Chunsoft at the time and now Spike Chunsoft, decided we needed to experience the world of Pokemon from a completely different point of view, which allowed for a break in the classic Pokemon formula. Anyone who's grown up with the Pokemon games or anime has at some point wished that they themselves were in the world of Pokemon, catching, training, trying to be the very best. However, a close second place fantasy that had never even crossed my mind as a child was, wait, what if I could be the Pokemon? I had never even considered this growing up until they announced this game, and immediately my response was, obviously I would want to do that. Side note, as a longtime viewer of the show growing up, I was incredibly excited for the anime adaptation of the Mystery Dungeon series, and I was substantially disappointed that it had only lasted one episode as a special for the release of the Red and Blue Mystery Dungeon games. Anyway, on to the part that did satisfy some of those childhood Pokemon dreams. Let's go ahead and figure out what's so great about Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Blue and Red Rescue Team. This wasn't some left-field spin-off like Pokemon Trose or Pokemon Pinball. Instead of fans just getting a different game with Pokemon branding, we were given an adventure in the world of Pokemon outside of trainers and gyms. What do feral Pokemon do when they're out and about? It almost feels like you're learning more about each species of Pokemon for reference in the mainline games, as if the individual Digletts, Smeargle, and Gengars actually speak and behave in accordance with others like it, and what you would expect from the species. Chunsoft did an excellent job of assigning believable traits to each type of Pokemon, to the point that the personalities aren't surprising, but in a good way, like saying, of course that's how a Kecleon would behave. Additionally pleasing from an introductory standpoint was the fact that you're not just playing as a random Pokemon. It's not just classic Pokemon from a Pokemon's point of view, which I think might have been expected when this game was first announced. But that might even be for the better. You don't have to fill the shoes of a Pokemon born in a Pokemon world knowing how Pokemon behave and interact. But, waking up as somebody who used to be a human, you get to discover all of this for the first time. With the shift in formula, dialogue and storytelling could take center stage in Mystery Dungeon, as opposed to traditional Pokemon titles which focus on collecting, combat, and simplified RPG elements. The collecting aspect of Pokemon was still possible, but it wasn't the focus. There's a whole side of the game arranged around making friends and adding them to your team, but it honestly feels a bit more, I don't know, humane than the rest of the games. You're not just capturing these creatures after you fight them and then checking them off a list of trophies. And I don't mean to sound all animal activist here, but I will say that the way Mystery Dungeons handles it just seems to fit the universe a bit more. These feral Pokemon are impressed by your capabilities and want to come along with you in the future, if you'll have them. It feels a lot more voluntary, which makes it more exciting when you have the opportunity to pick up a new friend and teammate. The dynamics between you and the other Pokemon around you are actually very interesting and constantly evolving as the story progresses. Who you're friends and enemies with adapts to the situations and keeps things fresh. There frankly isn't a lot of variation in the stories of the mainline games, or I should say that there didn't used to be. As of the last couple of generations of games, they've definitely expanded into an area of storytelling that previously was restricted by technical limitations. But let's look back into that era and check out the first generation, Red, Blue, Green, and Yellow. These were undeniably great, successful games, and was it because of their story? Absolutely not. The story is fun and simple, and it gives an avatar for children to connect to as they set off on an adventure, and that works. But it's certainly not the meat of the game by any means. There are no real stakes, not a huge depth to the antagonists. I mean, there's a little funny business with Team Rocket, but they're treated more like a side quest and a speed bump. Even defeating the Elite Four wasn't a part of your quest from the start, it's just to collect Pokemon. And that's fine. I love it. Millions of people have loved it for dozens of years, and that's commendable for so many aspects. But for those who want a more interesting story, with more in terms of risks, rewards, ups and downs, then Pokemon Mystery Dungeons would be more appropriate for them. Think about the fact that you've never seen a character cry in the mainline Pokemon games, at least to my memory. Even when characters yell or whine when defeated in battle or something happens to them in the overworld, the player still has a sense of, what do I care, as you grab your victory money and head off. The anime touched a little more on this, especially in the sense of adding weight to the relationships, showing the importance of friendships and how they grow, change, and even end. In these games, you feel closer to any individual Pokemon you spend more time with, whether they're part of the storyline or not, because they seem more personified, similar to raising the stakes through a Nuzlocke challenge in the mainline RPGs. Now, on the topic of how Pokemon join based on friendship, occasionally this offshoot series can become a little too campy, which is alright, it is still a game meant to be suitable for all ages. However, the earlier games, such as Red and Blue teams as we're discussing today, toe the line between cheery and dramatic in a much tighter fashion than some of the other entries, notably the last release as of this video, Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon on the 3DS. This most recent game became much more childish with much fewer surprises. Even though the 3D visuals are enjoyable and clean, they make everything feel a little more cartoony, but we've seen this in the mainline games as well. But let's look at the character situations between both games. In the first Mystery Dungeon games, you're a human-turned Pokemon who's lost their memory and starts up a rescue department with your friend as a helpline to other Pokemon in need, fighting for what's right and saving the lost and needy, all while discovering more about what happened to you. A very noble cause through treacherous settings. You are able to quickly grasp the drama of the situation through story alone, not just through the sometimes complex and difficult gameplay segments. However, in Super Mystery Dungeons, you wake up as a Pokemon and you go to school, and then you have to sneak around to challenge schoolyard bullies. It just lost some of its luster. And the same general storyline is there of waking up as a Pokemon and trying to figure out why, but now you're constantly trying to be a rescue team, rather than just doing it, despite what others think of you, as in the first entry. In the mainline series, there's a desensitization to the conditions of your team. If they faint in a fight, then you can just go heal them between battles and continue on your journey. It may cost you a little time, but not really any progress. Even if you were to totally black out while deep in a cave, you could just go back to a Pokemon Center and be able to charge through all of the previously defeated opponents and get back to where you were in record time. After about the second gym in most Pokemon games, money also ceases to be an issue, so that's not even a worry in terms of consequences. In the earlier games, you couldn't even refight trainers and enemies throughout your journey. And even once you could, after a few games down the line, there still wasn't much of a purpose in doing so for the most part. Maybe a little more experience and money, but that's it. Otherwise, once you've cleared a route, it's on to the next city to face the next gym. But in Mystery Dungeons, these characters have more stakes. These Pokemon are trapped, their friends are lost, and they don't know what to do, and they need the help of a rescue team. A lot of Pokemon need your help. They need someone strong and cunning to reach them in these treacherous dungeons, and it's really fun to be the help that they need. There are also stakes for you, though. In fact, it's one of the things that this series was critiqued for being too merciless with. While you're out and about on rescue missions, if you happen to fall in the field, you will lose all of the money you were carrying and a large chunk of your good items. The only trade-off here is that you get to keep any of the experience you gained along the way, which can actually be very important to hold on to. If you're returning to an old cave to either grind, collect, or complete tasks, falling in battle can also mean the loss of any potential new team members. And these aren't just consequences of your whole team going down, this means it's curtains if either you, your partner, or even the Pokemon you're helping meet their doom in battle. Unlike traditional Pokemon, where the increase in difficulty just comes from facing enemies with higher and higher stats, the challenge in Mystery Dungeons actually comes from limiting the player's resources. Taking away your ability to use certain teammates, which parts of the world you can visit at a time, and whether or not you even have access to stores and items, all greatly ramp up the level of difficulty between early and mid-game. Type differences can also be much more daunting when you have such a selective roster to choose from. Training a team of usual suspects is actually much more involved in a game where there are still high consequences for messing up grinding sessions, or, as mentioned earlier, not even having access to these buffed up teammates during certain missions. Forcing you to strategize your way through each floor of a dungeon takes away the idea of ringers on your team that come into play in the mainline games. Instead, forethought, balance, and pacing all play much bigger roles in your success. Spin-offs are a tricky art form. Sometimes they hit, and sometimes they flop hard. There's a bit of a stigma to immediately approach a spin-off with the idea of, well, this isn't a real insert game franchise here game, so it's not nearly as good. and it makes it a lot harder for these games to get their due credit. I mean, some spin-offs land perfectly well with an audience, considering the fact that games like Luigi's Mansion, Persona, and even Super Smash Bros. Are spin-offs in one form or another. Our topic game today may be in the universe of one of Nintendo's most popular and beloved franchises out there, but let me level with you for a second. Honestly, this isn't the most perfect game that exists. The dungeons do get repetitive and there are some serious pacing issues in terms of difficulty, but none of that stops it from being a great game. I don't think anyone should have been expecting the same level of success as the mainline Pokemon games. Frankly, that is just near impossible in this day and age of gaming, or I should even say when these games were first released. What is very possible, however, is mixing things up a bit. There are titles and characters that nearly everyone could recognize if they were just shown a picture on the street, and there are truckloads of successful game series that don't change that much from entry to entry because their success comes from the fact that fans know what they want and they know what they're getting and that it will satisfy that need. What's nice to see every once in a while is a new game being shared in an already established universe that fans love, but have the chance to see in a different light. Greatness doesn't come from money made or copies sold. It comes from the impacts that are had on anyone who experiences it. I don't think anyone ever asked for mystery dungeons, but Chunsoft obviously put a lot of effort into trying Pokemon in a new way, and it still landed favorably with many gamers and Nintendo fans out there, and provided a new adventure for every Pokemon lover to try out. And that is what's so great about Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red and Blue Rescue Team. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of What's So Great About Gaming as we saw the world of Pokemon from a new point of view. Make sure to tell us what you think about Mystery Dungeon Red and Blue, or even suggest a game for another video. If you want to hear what's great about another game, check out the link to our last episode, Stardew Valley, on screen or in the description. And if you want to be a part of a positive gaming community, please take the time to subscribe to be involved in the discussions. Thanks again for watching, now go play a great game. We'll see you next time.